Great. Well, thank you all for sticking around for the lightning round talk. I literally just poured water over my computer and myself, and my display started to blink, and so it really might have been a true lightning talk if I hadn't gotten the presentation to my colleague Glenn here. Thank you for having me. My name is Katy Antypas. I lead a data department at NERSC, and I realize not everyone is from the HPC community here. So just a quick update or introduction to NERSC. We are the mission high-performance computing facility for the Department of Energy Office of Science. So what that means is we run the open, unclassified workload for the Office of Science, and that spans a whole range of scientific disciplines from astrophysics, chemistry, biology, fusion energy, material science. If it's unclassified energy research and it requires computation, it probably runs at NERSC. So we also have an incredibly broad user base. We have about 6,000 users and about 750 projects that run on our systems. And what that typically means is that we always have users that find the corner and edge cases to debug these systems and storage systems. And so when you think traditionally about high-performance computing, and we often think of simulation and modeling, right? You have a climate model, you evolve it forward in time and have an end state, and perhaps you have a model of a fusion simulation, and you evolve that forward in time. But with 6,000 users, we actually have a huge variety of workloads running on our system. And some users use a lot of compute time and don't write a lot of data. Others use a very small amount of compute time, but analyze huge amounts of data. And so what's been the case is that NERSC, we've been supporting data-intensive science for a really long time, in some cases going back 20 years or to when NERSC started. And so here are some of the projects that we've supported that are very data intensive. A number of them come from data analysis workloads from a Large Hadron Collider in CERN. There's other astrophysics workloads. The Planck satellite sends us data that are analyzed on the NERSC systems. And then recently, about 5 or 6 years ago, we partnered with the Joint Genome Institute, which is a genomic sequencing facility. And what was true in all of these cases is that for each one of these projects, what we did is we went and talked to the users in the community, and then we set up a cluster for them. And they were able to we were able to configure the amount of compute versus storage that they needed. And so we actually really had bifurcated our workload, and so we had large-scale systems that were dedicated to the traditional HPC simulation and modeling workloads. And then we had these data-intensive clusters that had quite a bit more storage, maybe local disks, and different ratios that were really configured to particular workloads. So you could ask, well, why don't you continue doing this? What's the problem with having these two kind of separate workloads? And there's a few issues with that. Right now, what we see is that scientists now want to combine large-scale data analysis with modeling and simulation. We already see this in astrophysics, where you'll do some models of the universe, and you'll want to also compare it to data that has been taken from satellites that might be missing or dirty, that needs to be cleaned and run at very large scale. We also see this workload emerging in the climate community, where you have large-scale models, but you also want to take data from sensors and detectors. So it's important that these workloads can run at the large scale on the same system. Another thing we see is that the increased data rates and new detectors are just coming to us from all directions. So the Office of Science not only runs large-scale computing facilities, but they run facilities that are light sources, telescopes, electron microscopes. And what we can't do is set up a cluster for each one of these communities or put a supercomputer at the end of every one of these detectors. And so what we're looking to do is combine our data analysis and simulation modeling workloads on the same same systems, but what we need to do is better understand that the workloads from the data-intensive side. So now I want to just repeat a slide that you may have seen a little earlier today. So this is a partnership with Apex, with Los Alamos, Sandia, and NERSC for our next generation systems coming in 2020. This is work done by Dave Montoya and Chris Daly to look and analyze what some of these workloads from experimental facilities look like. And so in this case, what you can see is we are trying to figure out, well, how much of that data is stored permanently? How much of it is just temporary files that are deleted at the end of the run? And until you start working closely with these experimental facilities and those users, then you actually don't have a good idea of what those users are doing. And so in this case, you can see an initial HDF5 file is read in from disk. Then there's a few temporary files that are written and do not need to be stored permanently. And then, there's some reconstruction files that are created that are then stored long-term on, need to be kept forever. And so if you look at this workflow paper that we've put out, you can see a number of different models and use cases, and we think this will be helpful. I was glad to hear from some of the vendors that they found this document helpful. It's been helpful for us even just to create it and go through the process. So what's our vision here? Our vision, when we say a super facility, our vision is to have a network of interconnected facilities from, say, the Office of Science that are computational, the light sources, telescopes, where you can enable new modes of discovery. I think someone asked, are you looking to just do something faster, or are you looking to do something different? And we're looking definitely to do something, enable some new science and new capabilities. And I can give you one or two examples. In the light source community, there's different light sources all across the country. And ideally, some scientists would like to take the same sample and analyze it at different light sources and do some multimodal analysis across them. Right now, that is just an incredibly difficult and one-off kind of analysis because we don't have the metadata in place in order to track and track these files from facility to facility. And that was one example of when we spoke to some of the material scientists about something they really would like to do, but are very limited by their data capabilities now. So I wanted to leave you with a couple thoughts on what would be some future or emerging requirements that we see from experimental facilities and how this could impact the storage systems and the storage requirements. Okay, so seamless data movement and management from the external experiment all the way through the memorage and storage hierarchy will need to become much more automated. It will require coordinated software stacks, data models, and metadata. Right now, most of this is very manual, and we've heard that over and over again today about the individual workflows. The same data often needs to be accessed by multiple users and groups, and we see this in the genomics community where one data set, raw data set, may be used for assembly from some scientists, annotations by others, and so that becomes a requirement on the system and the storage system. It's very important in the Office of Science workloads, if you're going to think of these data-intensive workflows, that databases, web servers, things that are external to the main compute system are treated as first-class citizens with first-class access to the storage. And especially when we're talking about some of these new technologies, we want to make sure that those can be deployed across our auxiliary systems. A big one for us is scheduling. Right now, scheduling is one of the most contentious things in our system. There's always users who have opinions on our scheduling policies, but it's about to get a lot more complicated. In addition to just scheduling compute, we're going to need to be able to schedule bandwidth and storage, as well as an external experiment. We're going to need to be able to analyze streaming data and have high bandwidth ingest rates into the compute nodes and storage systems. And finally, authentication and identity management are going to become, I think, even more important than they are already now. I know our sponsors are asking, well, what do you mean you're getting users and data from Slack? How is that being authenticated? How are you ensuring that the systems are secure? So with that, I hope I stayed within the lightning round talk, and thank you. And if you have any questions and want to talk further, I'll be here tomorrow and the next day. Thanks.